Welcome to Wheelock's Latin, Chapter 4. In this chapter, we'll learn the second declension neuter endings. Let's review the second declension masculine endings. In the previous chapter, we used our sample nouns amicus, amici, and puer, pueri. For the neuter, we'll use our sample noun donum, doni. Let's review the masculine first. You learned in Chapter 3 that the endings are amicus, amici, amico, amicum, amico, amice, amici, amicorum, amicis, amicos, amicis, amici. The neuter endings, which we're learning in this chapter, you'll notice similarities in many places and a few key differences. The first one, donum, you'll see right away that the nominative singular ends in um instead of us. The genitive singular, doni, looks like the masculine ending, the long I. Dative singular and accusative singular, dono, donum, also look like what you learned in the masculine. I'm going to pause here and tell you a little hint. In every single declension that you will learn, the neuter nominative and the neuter accusative will always be identical. The ablative singular, dono, looks like the masculine ablative singular, amico. The vocative repeats the nominative. Again, in every declension that you will learn, the nominative, accusative, and vocative singular for the neuter will always be identical. In the plural, here's a major difference. The nominative plural in the neuter is represented by a short a, dona, as opposed to the masculine nominative plural, which is the long I, amici. But then you'll see the familiar endings donorum and donis. Just as with the singular, in the plural, the neuter accusative and neuter nominative are always identical. Then the ablative is what you learned for the masculine. Then the vocative is identical to the nominative, dona. You'll notice that the endings are similar to the masculine in several places: genitive singular, dative singular, accusative singular, ablative singular, genitive plural, dative plural, and ablative plural. The endings are different in the nominative singular, vocative singular, nominative plural, accusative plural, and vocative plural. Now that we've learned the full second declension, we can look at the full declension of a 2-1-2 adjective. A 2-1-2 adjective is what we call the adjective magnus, magna, magnum, and all other adjectives that follow this pattern. It means that the first part of the dictionary, the masculine nominative singular, follows the second declension. The second part of the dictionary entry, which is the feminine nominative singular, the feminine follows the first declension. And the neuter of this adjective follows the second declension, using the endings we just learned. So let's look at a full declension. For magnus, the masculine adjective, you use the endings that you learned in Chapter 3. For magna, the feminine adjective, you use the endings that you learned in Chapter 2. And for magnum, the neuter adjective, you use the endings that we learned just now. The last new grammatical concept in this chapter is forms of to be and the idea of the predicate nominative. The infinitive of to be is esse. The stem is ses, and the ending is se. If you recall from the first and second conjugations, you're used to an infinitive ending in re. The se of the verb esse is the same as the re of the verbs amara and monera. When the stem ends in a consonant, the infinitive ending is se, and when the stem ends in a vowel, the infinitive ending is re. Most of the time, you'll see the ending re. It's probably best to just think of the fact that the forms of to be are irregular. The present active indicative conjugation is as follows. The first person singular, I am, in Latin is sum. I have a sample sentence here that will help us look at what the predicate nominative is. The sample sentence, magistra sum, means I am a teacher. In Latin, there's no definite or indefinite article, so it could also mean I am the teacher. In English, the subject of the sentence is I, the verb is am, and in Latin, this is represented with one word, sum. It's the verb, but from this verb we can extrapolate that the subject is I. In the English sentence, the teacher is the predicate. In English, we don't have to understand how the word functions in the sentence to know what form of the noun to use, because the noun doesn't change. In Latin, we have to understand that this is a predicate and not a direct object, because predicates are in the nominative, whereas direct objects are in the accusative. Predicates occur anytime you have a linking verb like to be. For now, the only linking verb we know is to be and all of its forms. So on the other side of any form of to be, you will have a predicate nominative. The second person singular, you are, is represented in Latin as es. And again, we have a sample sentence, poeta es, which means you are a poet. In English, the subject is you, the verb is are, and a poet is the predicate. You'll notice that in the Latin sentence, poeta must be in the nominative because predicates are in the nominative. The third person singular, he, she, it is, in Latin, the version of this is est. The first person plural, we are, in Latin is sumus. The second person plural, you all are, in Latin is estis. And the third person plural, they are, in Latin is sunt. If you look at these forms, sum, es, est, sumus, estis, sunt, you'll see that you can recognize, for the most part, the endings that you've learned before. O or M in the first one. The S in the second one has actually disappeared and you're left with only the stem. T in the third singular, then mus, tis, nt in the plural. The stem es is only visible in the second person singular, the third person singular, and the second person plural. In the remaining forms, sum, sumus, and sunt, that stem s has changed into su to give us sum, es, est, sumus, estis, sunt. As I mentioned before, think of this as an irregular verb where you have to memorize the individual forms as a chart. See you next time!